There is something forming around your daughter that you cannot see with your natural eyes, but your spirit has already felt it. This is not fear talking. This is discernment waking up. In this message, you will understand why the unease you've sensed is not random, why subtle shifts in her life matter more than they appear, and why heaven is calling you to stand as her gatekeeper right now. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is not just information. It is instruction, alignment, and divine intervention for her future. There is a tension building beyond what your eyes can measure, and at the center of that tension stands your daughter. This is not exaggeration. It is not emotional overreach. It is a spiritual reality that has been forming quietly, subtly, almost invisibly, while ordinary days continued as usual. You were not brought to this message randomly. Out of the millions of voices competing for your attention, this one reached you because heaven has marked you as the one who must see clearly now. There is movement happening around her future, movement that does not announce itself with obvious danger, but disguises itself in familiarity, opportunity, and charm. What looks harmless on the surface carries intention beneath it. What appears supportive may conceal control. What feels like coincidence may actually be coordination. And you, whether you have fully realized it or not, are the gatekeeper positioned at the threshold of her destiny. The warning is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to wake you. Scripture says in Luke 8:17 that nothing hidden will remain concealed. What is forming in shadow is already being exposed in light, not because of panic, but because of purpose. Your daughter has been observed, not just by heaven, but by influences that recognize something valuable in her. She carries a calling that disturbs darkness precisely because it carries light. Long before she understood who she was, before she developed confidence or language to describe her gifts, she was known. Jeremiah 1:5 declares that before formation in the womb, identity was established. She was not born empty, she arrived with design. That design is what makes her a target. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the quiet, strategic way opposition operates when it wants to redirect potential rather than destroy it outright. It is easier to mislead a purpose than to attack it directly. It is easier to reshape a path subtly than to shatter it openly. And that is why what is unfolding around her feels confusing rather than catastrophic. You may have noticed subtle changes, a slight withdrawal, a hesitation she cannot explain, moments where her chest tightens for no visible reason, a sense that something is off, though she cannot articulate what. Do not dismiss those signals. They are not teenage moodiness. They are not random emotion. They are spiritual sensitivity registering shifts around her. Something has been attempting to influence the pen that writes her story. Conversations have occurred without her awareness. Invitations are being prepared that look promising on the outside, but carry emptiness within. There is a shaping attempt underway, a redirection masked as opportunity. And yet, heaven has already responded. Isaiah 54:17 states that no weapon formed against her will prosper. Notice it does not say no weapon will form. It says it will not succeed. The formation may begin, but the outcome is already decided when the right authority steps into position. That authority, in this moment, is you. You are not passive in this narrative. You are not a spectator watching events unfold helplessly. You are the spiritual covering assigned to her. Your awareness is not incidental. It is strategic. When you feel that nudge in your spirit, that subtle discomfort you cannot logically justify, it is not anxiety. It is discernment activating. The Holy Spirit does not always shout. Often it presses gently, persistently, until you look closer. And once you look, you cannot unsee. There are two sets of eyes watching your daughter's life. One set celebrates her light, prays for her growth, and supports her development. The other set studies her patterns, assesses her vulnerabilities, and waits for moments of transition. Those who seek to redirect her will not appear hostile. They will appear helpful. They will present doors that shimmer with possibility, growth, belonging, advancement, validation. But beneath those painted surfaces lies a hollow space where her true design would slowly thin out. The enemy rarely tempts the gifted with obvious darkness. He tempts them with diluted light. And that is why your role matters so profoundly. Heaven did not bring this revelation to her first. It came to you because you are positioned to discern what she cannot yet see. She is still learning the language of her own intuition. You have already lived long enough to recognize patterns. You understand that not every open door is divine. Not every opportunity is alignment. Not every smiling face carries covenant. What has been unfolding around her is not random social interaction. It is influence architecture. Subtle suggestions, emotional hooks, carefully timed affirmations designed to build trust before direction shifts. And yet, what those influences did not account for was your vigilance. They did not account for the prayers you whispered over her when she slept. They did not account for the times you sensed something unsettled and quietly asked God for clarity. Those prayers created legal ground in the unseen realm. Heaven moves where it is invited, and you have been inviting protection long before you had language for the threat. That is why this moment feels urgent, but not chaotic. The exposure is already in progress. There is a net attempting to tighten, but threads are unraveling before they fully secure. What was meant to develop unnoticed is being brought to your attention early. That is grace. That is intervention. That is divine timing. You may feel the weight of responsibility pressing heavier now. That weight is not fear. It is mantle. You have been entrusted with sight, and sight carries obligation. To see and do nothing is negligence. To see and respond is authority. The crossroads before her is real. One path gleams with fast affirmation and external applause, but lacks spiritual foundation. The other appears quieter, slower, less glamorous, but it carries longevity and divine alignment. She cannot yet distinguish the subtle difference between charisma and calling. You can. That is why you are here. The hands attempting to guide her do not realize that heaven has already drawn a circle around her life. They do not realize that Archangel Michael stands in defense, not theatrically, but decisively. They do not realize that your voice has been echoing in heaven's courts each time you refused to ignore that internal alarm. You are not chosen because you are flawless. You are chosen because you are responsive. And responsiveness is what shifts outcomes. This is the warning, but it is also the invitation. You are being asked to step fully into the role that has always been yours, not as a warrior, not as a controller, but as a gatekeeper. The storm may be forming beyond visible skies, but storms lose power when watchmen are awake. And you are awake now. Awareness is the turning point. The moment you see clearly, the momentum of what was forming begins to shift. What was counting on your distraction loses its advantage when you become attentive. This is why this warning came before visible damage. Heaven does not wait for collapse when intercession can prevent it. There has been movement behind ordinary conversations, subtle shaping through environments that seem harmless, gradual normalization of influences that carry just enough truth to appear safe. That is how redirection works. It does not demand rebellion. It invites compromise. It does not announce destruction. It suggests adjustment. And if left unexamined, small adjustments become altered destinies. But this is where the line is drawn. You are not being asked to panic. You are being asked to stand. When Scripture says in Isaiah 54:17 that no weapon formed against her will prosper, it implies confrontation without defeat. A weapon may take shape, but its impact is cancelled when rightful authority intervenes. Your daughter stands at a threshold she does not yet recognize as pivotal. She senses something, but she does not fully understand it. That subtle unease in her chest is not random anxiety. It is the friction between design and distraction. Her spirit recognizes misalignment before her mind can articulate it. But young discernment often gets overridden by external validation. If something looks promising, feels exciting, or offers immediate belonging, it can drown out the quiet caution inside her. That is why you must be steady. Your calm perception will anchor her while her internal compass strengthens. There are conversations she may not tell you about, invitations she may not fully explain, opportunities that sound impressive when summarized, but feel hollow when examined closely. Pay attention to what feels rushed. Pay attention to what demands quick decisions. Manipulation thrives on urgency. Divine alignment allows space to breathe. When something pressures her to decide without reflection, that pressure is a signal. What is forming around her is strategic, but it is not superior to the strategy of heaven. The net being woven around her future is constructed from envy disguised as mentorship, from control disguised as guidance, from admiration that subtly seeks ownership. Those who see her potential but do not honor her purpose may attempt to shape her into something useful for them rather than aligned with God. That shaping rarely looks aggressive. It looks supportive. It feels flattering. It comes wrapped in opportunity. But opportunity without covenant drains rather than builds. And here is what they did not anticipate. You are paying attention now. Your spiritual sensitivity is not coincidence. It is commission. The Holy Spirit often awakens guardians before the guarded understand the threat. This is not because she is weak. It is because generational covering works in layers. She will grow into her own discernment, but right now, your awareness bridges that gap. What you feel stirring inside you is not paranoia. It is recognition. Something about this season feels heightened. Patterns are repeating. Names are resurfacing. Situations are aligning too precisely to dismiss. Heaven speaks in patterns before it speaks in volume. Repetition is revelation. When you notice something appearing more than once in a short window, examine it. When a certain influence consistently shifts her mood, examine it. When a specific opportunity consistently unsettles your spirit despite logical benefits, examine it. Discernment does not always come with a detailed explanation. Sometimes it comes as resistance without rationale. Trust that. You have lived long enough to know that intuition sharpened by prayer is rarely wrong. The enemy's most subtle tactic is not open rebellion, but gradual redefinition. Redefinition of values, redefinition of boundaries, redefinition of identity. If he can slowly convince her that compromise is maturity, that dilution is flexibility, that silence is peace, then her path shifts without obvious conflict. But what was written over her life before birth cannot be erased by suggestion. Jeremiah 1:5 stands firm regardless of external pressure. She was known before she was influenced. She was appointed before she was approached. That pre-existing design is what heaven is protecting right now. And heaven's protection often operates through earthly obedience. Your voice matters more than you realize. Not in lectures, not in control, but in atmosphere. The tone you set in your home creates contrast against counterfeit environments. When she experiences genuine peace with you, she will more easily recognize imitation peace elsewhere. When you affirm her identity consistently, external attempts to redefine her will weaken. When you ask questions without accusation, she will feel safe enough to reveal what she is navigating. The goal is not to isolate her. The goal is to equip her. You are not here to block every door. You are here to help her distinguish between painted gates and covenant entrances. There will be moments soon where something surfaces, a comment that exposes hidden motive, a situation that collapses unexpectedly, an invitation that falls through without explanation. Do not grieve those disruptions. They are protective closures. What feels like loss may actually be interception. Exposure is already beginning. Those who attempted to shape her narrative will become careless. Subtle intentions will slip through in tone or timing. What was carefully masked will show seams. And when it does, remain composed. You do not need dramatic confrontation. You need clarity. Light destabilizes manipulation more effectively than argument. The circle around her is tightening, but not in entrapment, in defense. Archangel Michael is not symbolic in this narrative. He represents decisive intervention, not noise, not spectacle, protection that executes quietly and thoroughly. But angelic defense does not replace human responsibility. It partners with it. Your agreement with heaven activates what has already been decreed. The crossroads she stands at is narrowing. One direction offers immediate affirmation, but long-term erosion. The other offers slower development, but durable identity. She may be drawn toward what feels vibrant and exciting. That is natural. Youth gravitates toward brightness. Your role is not to extinguish her excitement. It is to help her examine its source. Does this path honor who she truly is? Does it respect her boundaries? Does it align with the character God has been forming in her? Or does it subtly pressure her to adjust herself to fit someone else's vision? These are the questions that reveal truth. You are not given this awareness to carry alone. You are given it to act. Pray intentionally, not vaguely. Speak her name with authority. Bless her path aloud even when she is not present. Words carry weight in the unseen realm. And understand this clearly. The story being written over her life is not theirs to author. It never was. What they attempted to draft is being erased before ink dries. The hidden plan loses coherence the moment a gatekeeper awakens. And you are awake. This is not the climax of the story. It is the pivot. What was forming in shadow has encountered resistance in light. The warning has been delivered. The mantle has been placed. You are not simply informed. You are commissioned. The next movements will unfold because you chose to see instead of scroll past, to listen instead of dismiss, to stand instead of shrink. The storm may still gather in the distance, but it will not overtake what is covered, guarded, and spoken for. Chapter 1 does not end in fear. It ends in position. And you are now positioned. The moment you awakened to what was forming around her, something else began to move. Awareness does not simply expose danger, it activates defense. The same spirit that hovered over the waters in Genesis before creation took shape is now hovering over your household. What looked like ordinary days are no longer ordinary. You are standing in a divine appointment, a Zion moment, where sight is being sharpened and patterns are being revealed. Heaven rarely speaks first in volume. It speaks in repetition. A name resurfacing, a phrase spoken twice, a sudden shift in friendships, a door that opens too easily and feels slightly off. These are not coincidences, they are signals. What others dismiss as random timing is often sequence, and sequence is how God communicates to those who are paying attention. You may begin noticing that certain opportunities circling your daughter feel polished but hollow. They present themselves with the language of growth, exposure, connection, advancement. On the surface, they check every box. They look like answered prayer. Yet when you sit quietly and examine them, something unsettles your spirit. That unsettled feeling is not negativity. It is discernment, detecting imitation. The enemy rarely approaches the gifted with obvious darkness. He approaches them with light that is slightly altered, truth that is partially diluted, affirmation that subtly attaches strings. A decoy does not look dangerous. It looks desirable. That is what makes it effective. There are doors being positioned before her that shimmer like gold from the distance. They appear to offer belonging, validation, perhaps even influence. But when you examine their foundation, you sense instability. These are painted gates. They are constructed to attract, not to sustain. If entered without discernment, they lead into spaces where purpose is slowly drained rather than strengthened. The strategy is not immediate destruction. It is gradual redirection. Shift her schedule. Adjust her influences. Introduce voices that sound wise but lack covenant. Over time, the accumulation of small compromises produces a life that looks successful, yet feels misaligned. But heaven interrupts misalignment early when a guardian is awake. In 2 Kings 6, Elisha's servant panicked when he saw the enemy army surrounding them. Elisha did not deny the army's presence. He prayed that the servant's eyes would open, and when they did, he saw chariots of fire surrounding what appeared to be a hopeless situation. This is your Elisha moment.
What appears like vulnerability around your daughter is not undefended. There is divine defense already in motion. You are not looking at an exposed life. You are looking at a life surrounded by reinforcement that most cannot see. The difference now is that your eyes are opening. You are beginning to perceive layers. A friendship that once felt harmless now feels strategically intense. An invitation that once seemed flattering now feels rushed. A mentor figure that once sounded inspiring now feels subtly controlling. Patterns are surfacing. And when patterns surface, exposure follows. Heaven speaks in patterns before it speaks in proclamation. When something repeats, examine it. When something accelerates unusually, question it. When something pressures quick agreement, pause. Divine opportunities do not fear examination. Counterfeit ones do. You may recall prayers you whispered months ago, perhaps even years ago, asking God to guard her path, to shield her from influences that would dilute her calling. Those prayers were not filed away. They were recorded, and now they are activating response. The revelation you are receiving is connected to the intercession you have already offered. You are not reacting late. You are responding on time. The subtle net being woven around her future is beginning to loosen thread by thread, not because you confronted anyone, not because you created conflict, but because you saw. Vision destabilizes deception. The moment a decoy is recognized, it loses some of its power. The enemy depends on unconscious agreement. Once awareness enters the room, the strategy must adjust. You may notice small shifts in her demeanor, a sudden peace after a season of restlessness, an unexpected hesitation about something she previously seemed excited about, a cancelled plan that disappoints her temporarily but leaves an unexplainable relief. These are not random fluctuations. They are evidence of reversal beginning quietly.
Archangel Michael is not moving with spectacle. He is moving with precision. Protection does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply redirects traffic in the unseen realm so that collisions never occur. The counterfeit path often mimics the language of destiny. It speaks of impact, recognition, growth, influence, but it lacks the breath of God. It carries ambition without anointing, affirmation without accountability, exposure without covering. That absence is subtle, but critical. When something lacks divine breath, it may shine temporarily, but it cannot sustain spiritual weight. Your daughter may not yet discern the difference between charisma and calling. She may be drawn toward brightness. That is natural. Brightness attracts youth. But brightness without covenant fades quickly. Your role is not to extinguish her enthusiasm. It is to examine its source. Ask yourself quietly, does this environment honor her identity, or does it subtly reshape it? Does this opportunity strengthen her boundaries, or does it blur them? Does this influence point her toward deeper alignment with God, or toward performance? These questions separate genuine doors from painted gates. And understand this clearly. Your awakening is not creating conflict. It is initiating unraveling. The web that was tightening is beginning to slacken. Threads are loosening because someone is watching. You were not shown this to panic. You were shown this to participate. Your agreement with heaven accelerates the reversal already underway. The same spirit that moved over chaos in Genesis is moving over this situation, bringing order before confusion fully forms. What seemed inevitable is not inevitable. What looked impressive is not necessarily ordained, and what felt urgent does not require immediate submission. The beginning of reversal rarely looks dramatic. It looks like subtle hesitation, quiet clarity, small redirections. But those small redirections protect entire futures.
And this is only the beginning of what heaven is revealing. The reversal does not announce itself with noise. It begins with subtle shifts that only the spiritually attentive recognize. What was once pulling strongly at her begins to lose magnetism. Invitations that felt urgent begin to feel optional. Conversations that once carried emotional charge start to fall flat. This is not coincidence. This is unraveling. The counterfeit path depends on emotional momentum. Once that momentum weakens, the structure begins to collapse. You may observe that certain people who once seemed deeply invested in her suddenly become inconsistent. Their intensity fades, their persuasion loses sharpness. What changed is not their strategy. What changed is the covering over her life. When discernment activates, manipulation struggles to land. The decoy doors that shimmered before her are beginning to dull. What once looked like a perfect opportunity now reveals subtle flaws. Small inconsistencies surface, timelines shift, promises feel exaggerated. When heaven intervenes, it does not always block a door visibly. Sometimes it removes the illusion that made the door attractive in the first place. She may not articulate this clearly, but she will begin sensing that something she thought she wanted no longer fits. Do not rush to interpret this as confusion. It is recalibration. Her spirit is adjusting to alignment. This is where your steadiness becomes essential. If she voices uncertainty, resist the urge to correct or control. Instead, ask questions that lead her inward. What about this feels different now? What changed in how you see it? When you give her space to process rather than pressure to perform, you strengthen her discernment muscle. She must learn to trust that subtle internal shift. That is how she will guard herself long after this season passes. Heaven is not only dismantling the counterfeit path, it is strengthening her perception. The enemy's strategy relied on distraction disguised as destiny. But destiny does not require urgency rooted in fear. It does not demand compromise disguised as flexibility. It does not flatter without foundation. As the illusion fades, clarity emerges. You may witness moments where she pauses before responding to something that once would have excited her instantly. That pause is progress. It is evidence that internal alignment is catching up to external pressure. Do not underestimate small pauses. Entire futures pivot in moments of hesitation. Meanwhile, those who attempted to influence her may grow confused. Their words no longer carry the same impact. Their invitations meet gentle resistance. They may sense emotional distance and misinterpret it. Let them. Confusion on their end is confirmation of protection on yours. You are not required to explain what they cannot see. You are required to remain anchored. Exposure continues quietly. Comments slip out that reveal motive. Subtle expectations become more visible. What once appeared supportive now shows hints of control. And as these hints surface, your confidence in your discernment will increase. This is how heaven builds conviction without chaos. The unraveling happens thread by thread, not in explosive confrontation, but in steady exposure. And understand this: the reversal is not only defensive, it is restorative. What was meant to drain her is becoming fuel. The pressure she felt is refining her instincts. The subtle unease she experienced is teaching her to recognize misalignment faster. Every attempted detour is strengthening her capacity to identify truth. This is how God turns strategy against itself. What was designed to distract becomes training in discernment. What was meant to redirect becomes reinforcement of identity. Archangel Michael's presence in this narrative represents decisive protection, but it also represents order. Chaos does not get the final word. What looked like a tightening net is now loosening fibers. And the most important shift is this: she is beginning to feel like herself again. That light in her eyes returns gradually. Her laughter sounds less forced. Her posture carries less tension. These are not random mood improvements. They are indicators that pressure is lifting. When spiritual interference weakens, personality resurfaces. You may notice that she speaks with new clarity about what she wants and what she does not. Listen closely to those declarations. They are signs of ownership returning. She is reclaiming ground she did not realize she was surrendering. And your role remains consistent. Agreement. When she expresses hesitation about something that once attracted her, affirm her discernment. When she chooses to step back from an environment that no longer feels right, support that instinct. You are reinforcing the internal compass that heaven is sharpening. The counterfeit path depended on her ignoring subtle discomfort. The true path invites her to honor it. The decoy required speed. The authentic requires depth. As the unraveling continues, you will see evidence that prayers spoken in quiet are producing visible outcomes. Plans that seemed inevitable dissolve unexpectedly. Connections that looked strategic fade naturally. What was meant to escalate stalls. Do not interpret stalled momentum as delay. It is protection disguised as inconvenience. The enemy thrives on forward motion without reflection. Heaven introduces pause, so reflection can redirect motion toward alignment. The more you observe these small reversals, the more confidence you will carry. You will realize that intervention is not hypothetical, it is active. Your awakening initiated participation in something already decreed. And here is the deeper truth emerging. This season is not merely about blocking harm. It is about strengthening destiny. The counterfeit path could never sustain her long term, because it was never built for her design. As it collapses, space opens for what genuinely aligns. That opening may feel quiet at first. Do not mistake quiet for absence. Quiet often precedes authentic opportunity. What God builds does not need artificial shine. It carries weight without exaggeration. And as this chapter closes, understand that the reversal has begun in full. The decoys are weakening. The patterns are surfacing. The illusion is thinning. And you are no longer reacting to hidden strategy. You are walking ahead of it. The net that once seemed to tighten is unraveling thread by thread because you chose to see. Once exposure begins, it does not reverse. What was hidden starts surfacing in ways too precise to ignore. The plan that depended on secrecy now begins to collapse under light. This is the stage where confusion shifts from your daughter to those who attempted to influence her. Words slip that reveal more than intended. Tones change. Expectations surface too clearly. What was once carefully managed begins to fray at the edges. Heaven's exposure protocol is subtle but thorough. It does not always create scandal. It creates clarity. A comment that feels slightly possessive. A suggestion that carries an undertone of pressure. An invitation that reveals its true cost when examined closely. These moments are not random. They are the unraveling of a structure that could only function in shadow. Luke 8:17 declared that nothing hidden remains concealed. Now you are watching that principle unfold in real time. Your daughter may not frame it as spiritual exposure, but she will begin to feel it. Conversations that once felt magnetic now feel heavy. Compliments that once energized her now feel transactional. She may not articulate why, but she will begin to withdraw her emotional investment from what once attracted her. This is not rebellion. It is recalibration. The internal fog that once surrounded her is thinning. When deception loses its shine, the heart regains clarity. And clarity changes posture. You may notice her language shift. Where she once spoke with uncertainty, she now speaks with measured thought. Where she once reacted quickly, she now pauses. That pause is evidence of strength forming. Exposure does not merely dismantle harmful plans. It strengthens the one being protected. The voices that once carried influence begin to sound repetitive, predictable, even shallow. What once impressed her begins to feel scripted. This is what happens when illusion collapses. When something is no longer masked, it cannot maintain fascination. And while she processes these shifts internally, those who attempted to shape her path will sense something changing. They may push subtly to regain momentum, increased communication, renewed flattery, sudden urgency. But desperation reveals what confidence conceals. The more they attempt to reassert influence, the more transparent their motives become. Heaven does not only expose plans, it confuses plotters. The same strategies that once worked now misfire. Their timing feels off. Their tone feels forced. Their access feels limited. They may not understand why doors that once opened easily now meet resistance. That resistance is not her mood. It is protection. A wall has been placed where boundaries were once blurred. And that wall is not visible, but it is effective. Meanwhile, something deeper is happening within her. The inner unease that once felt destabilizing is transforming into discernment. Instead of being overwhelmed by discomfort, she's beginning to interpret it. She is learning that unease signals misalignment. This lesson will serve her long beyond this season. What was meant to disorient her is teaching her. What was meant to distract her is refining her perception. God wastes nothing. Even attempted detours become training ground. You may see moments where she seems reflective, quieter than usual, not in fear, but in evaluation. Do not rush her out of that process. Reflection is restructuring. She is reorganizing her understanding of trust, influence, and alignment. She is revisiting conversations in her mind and noticing what she missed before. That realization may sting briefly. Let it. Conviction is not condemnation. It is growth. As exposure increases, the golden appearance of certain doors fades completely. Invitations that once sparkled now feel hollow. She may even feel slight embarrassment for having been drawn to them. Guard her heart in that moment. Shame is not the goal of exposure. Freedom is. Remind her, through calm presence, that learning is not failure. It is wisdom forming. And here is where the turning becomes undeniable. What was meant to isolate her is now strengthening her. The confusion that once clouded her thoughts is clearing. The emotional weight she carried begins to lift. Her shoulders relax. Her eyes look steadier. She laughs without strain. These are not surface-level mood improvements. They are indicators of spiritual pressure decreasing. When hidden influence weakens, authenticity resurfaces. The circle of light around her life grows stronger. Not dramatic, not loud, but firm. The angels assigned to her stand where vulnerability once existed, and your role continues to matter. You are not orchestrating this, you are agreeing with it. Agreement amplifies alignment. When you affirm her instincts, you strengthen them. When you remain steady instead of reactive, you create safety for her clarity to mature. Exposure is not chaos, it is order returning. And the order returning now is reshaping her internal world. The plan that once aimed to redirect her is becoming raw material for her resilience. The same conversations that could have slowly bent her are now forging steel in her spine. What was meant to silence her will eventually amplify her voice. But first, she must walk through this state of recognition. Recognition that not every voice deserves access. Recognition that not every opportunity deserves attention. Recognition that her calling cannot be negotiated for convenience. This is the circle of light forming, not just around her circumstances, but within her character. And as this light strengthens, the strategy against her weakens proportionally. What relied on dimness cannot survive brightness. What depended on confusion cannot operate in clarity. Exposure is not the end of the story. It is the pivot into transformation, and you are witnessing it unfold. As clarity settles in, the shift becomes unmistakable. What once felt like pressure now feels like distance. The same environments that subtly shaped her begin to lose access, not because she fought them aggressively, but because alignment quietly withdrew permission. This is how divine reversal operates. It does not always confront, it repositions, and once repositioned, influence weakens naturally. You may observe that individuals who once seemed central to her daily rhythm are now peripheral. Communication becomes sporadic. Emotional intensity fades. The gravitational pull that once felt strong now feels neutral. They may attempt to re-establish control through renewed attention, but something has changed in her posture. She is no longer leaning toward them unconsciously. She is standing. And when a person stands in awareness, manipulation loses leverage. Heaven's confusion over the plotters is unfolding steadily. Those who thought they understood her patterns now misread them. They anticipate responses that do not come. They prepare narratives that no longer fit. The script they rehearsed no longer applies because she has stepped out of the role they expected her to play. This is not accidental. When God exposes, He simultaneously disrupts coordination. Plans crafted in secrecy begin contradicting themselves. Timing falters. Language misfires. Opportunities that once seemed perfectly aligned reveal fractures. What was constructed carefully begins to collapse under its own imbalance. Meanwhile, within her, something solid is forming. The internal fog that once clouded her perception has thinned enough for conviction to take root. She may not use spiritual language to describe it, but she will begin saying things with certainty. That doesn't feel right anymore. I don't think that's for me. I need space from that. Those simple statements are evidence of strength. Where confusion once reigned, discernment now stands. And discernment does not shout. It simply chooses differently. This is the soil of testimony being prepared. Every attempted detour becomes a reference point she will one day use to guide others. What was meant to erode her identity is fortifying it. She is learning that belonging does not require compromise. She is discovering that affirmation without integrity feels empty. She is realizing that true alignment carries peace, not pressure. These lessons cannot be taught through lecture. They are forged through exposure and decision. And she is deciding. You must understand your role in this phase. You are not forcing transformation. You are reinforcing it. Your agreement, your calm affirmation, your refusal to panic when she hesitates. These actions create an atmosphere where clarity feels safe. When she senses your steadiness, she trusts her own. When she sees you unshaken, she feels anchored. This is the mystery of spiritual leadership. It regulates without controlling. It guides without gripping. It strengthens without overshadowing. The circle of light imagery is no longer symbolic. It is functional. As awareness formed around her, protection intensified. The boundaries that once felt porous now feel solid. Emotional access is limited to those who honor her identity. Casual influence meets resistance. Even invitations that once would have bypassed scrutiny now encounter inner pause.
That pause is the gate closing gently, but firmly. And those on the outside will not fully understand why. They may interpret her distance as disinterest or immaturity. Let them. Their misunderstanding confirms the separation is working. Protection does not require explanation. It requires endurance. What is remarkable in this stage is how harm transforms into strength. The very pressure that sought to bend her is forging resilience. The confusion that unsettled her is becoming wisdom. The subtle manipulation that once drained her energy is now sharpening her ability to recognize imbalance quickly. God does not merely rescue, He repurposes. Every thread that attempted to bind her is being woven into reinforcement. She will carry this discernment forward into future rooms, future relationships, future opportunities. And because she walked through exposure rather than being shielded from it entirely, her understanding will be internal, not borrowed. That is lasting protection. You may notice a light returning fully now. Not naive light, not untested brightness, but refined radiance. There is a difference. Refined light carries depth. It smiles with awareness. It speaks with conviction. It moves with caution, but not fear. That is who she is becoming. And as she steps into this clearer version of herself, the counterfeit paths lose all remaining appeal. What once shimmered now looks artificial. What once felt urgent now feels irrelevant. That is the power of exposure completed. The plot that aimed to redirect her has not only failed, it has strengthened her alignment. And here is the most profound shift. You are no longer in warning mode. You are in witness mode. You are watching heaven turn strategy into testimony. The plan that relied on secrecy has been dismantled by awareness. The attempt to isolate her has resulted in deeper connection within your home. The effort to reshape her identity has clarified it. And as this chapter closes, understand that the circle of light remains. Angels stand where vulnerability once existed. Clarity resides where confusion once lingered. And your agreement with heaven continues to sustain what has been restored. Exposure has done its work. The turning is complete. Now strength begins to rise. Revelation without strategy leaves gaps. Exposure has taken place. The counterfeit has been weakened. But protection must now become practice. What began as spiritual awareness must translate into daily alignment. This is where heaven shifts from unveiling to instruction.
Not dramatic instruction, not complicated ritual, but structured, consistent stewardship. You are not being asked to intensify control. You are being invited to partner intentionally. The protection over her life is active, but participation stabilizes it. And participation begins with attention to atmosphere. Start by observing her emotional climate with precision. Not interrogation, observation. Notice the light in her eyes when she speaks about certain people. Notice the tension in her shoulders after certain environments. Pay attention to patterns in her energy rather than isolated moments. Sudden withdrawal is rarely random. Irritability without clear cause is often internal processing. When she grows quiet, do not rush to fill the silence. Silence is data. Watch how long it lingers. Watch what breaks it. When she re-emerges, listen carefully to the tone beneath her words. You are not diagnosing moods, you are mapping influence. The emotional atmosphere around her is the first indicator of alignment or disruption. And when you see a shift, respond with calm truth rather than correction. Speak stability. Simple statements hold power. You are safe. You are seen. You are not alone in this. These phrases may feel small, but they root deeply. They stabilize identity when external voices attempt to sway it. Create small, sacred touchpoints in your daily rhythm.
Not forced conversations, not structured lectures. Shared presence. A meal without distraction, sitting in the same room while she works, asking a single open question such as, "What felt heavy today?" These moments build invisible reinforcement. When Isaiah 30:15 speaks of strength in quietness and trust, it describes this dynamic. Safety grows in unhurried spaces. If she senses that your presence is steady rather than reactive, she will reveal more naturally. Protection is strengthened when communication flows freely. Track patterns discreetly. You are not surveilling, you are discerning. Write down repeated names. Notice repeated invitations. Observe which relationships energize her and which deplete her. Heaven speaks in repetition before volume. Joseph's dream repeated for confirmation, not drama. When something resurfaces consistently within a short time frame, it deserves examination. Over time, patterns reveal architecture. You will begin to see which influences strengthen her design and which attempt to redirect it. Clarity grows through documentation. Memory can blur detail. Written patterns remain objective. Clear the atmosphere of your home deliberately, not from fear, but from leadership. Open windows while you pray. Speak peace into rooms when she is not present. Luke 10:5 instructs to release peace over a house. Peace is not passive. It displaces heaviness. When you sense tension lingering after certain interactions, address it quietly. Let no residue stay here. Let clarity remain. Your home must feel different from every other environment she enters. It should feel like restoration, not pressure. When she walks through your door, her nervous system should exhale. That consistency becomes her internal reference point. Bless her name intentionally. Names carry identity weight. When she leaves the house or falls asleep, speak her name aloud and attach truth to it. She walks in wisdom. She moves in discernment. She is aligned with what was written before she was born. Words spoken consistently build internal architecture. Even if she never hears you say them, the atmosphere absorbs them. Identity affirmed regularly becomes resistant to counterfeit redefinition. The enemy attacks identity first. You reinforce it daily. Teach her to trust her own discernment without alarming her. Do not frame it as danger. Frame it as wisdom. Encourage her to pause when something feels off. Remind her that discomfort is not weakness.
it is early warning. Help her normalize saying no without justification. Empower her to delay decisions that feel rushed. When she learns to honor subtle hesitation, she becomes less susceptible to manipulation disguised as urgency. This is how long-term protection forms. You are not building dependency. You are building discernment autonomy. Pray as breath, not performance. You do not need extended visible rituals. Short, intentional prayers carry weight. Guard her steps. Reveal hidden motives. Align her timing. These phrases whispered consistently maintain spiritual clarity. James 5:16 states that the prayer of the righteous is effective. Effectiveness is not measured by volume. It is measured by alignment. Speak over her while folding laundry, while driving, while walking past her room. Integrate prayer into rhythm rather than isolating it as event. Protection sustained quietly becomes resilient. Watch for confirming signs. They will not be theatrical. A cancelled invitation that once seemed critical. A sudden clarity in her language. A subtle shift in posture. Document these moments. When you acknowledge evidence of protection, you reinforce expectation of continued protection. Gratitude stabilizes faith. Faith stabilizes vigilance. And vigilance, sustained gently, becomes leadership rather than anxiety. Most importantly, regulate yourself. Your steadiness sets tone. If you panic, she absorbs tension. If you remain calm, she absorbs security. This is the unspoken authority of a guardian. Your nervous system influences hers. Your confidence reinforces hers. When she senses that you are not afraid, she relaxes into alignment. You do not need dramatic declarations. You need consistency. The blueprint is not complicated, but it is intentional. Monitor atmosphere. Create touch points. Track patterns. Clear space. Bless identity. Empower discernment. Pray quietly. Record signs. Maintain calm. These actions appear ordinary. They carry spiritual authority. Heaven has already initiated reversal. These practices stabilize it. And this is only the first half of your partnership. Protection becomes sustainable when it moves from reaction to leadership. What you are building now is not temporary defense, but durable atmosphere. The earlier chapters revealed the warning, exposed the counterfeit, and demonstrated the reversal. Now the responsibility is to seal what has shifted. This sealing does not happen through control or intensity. It happens through consistency. You are shaping an environment where clarity remains stronger than confusion and identity remains louder than influence. The first layer of this sealing is emotional regulation. Your composure is not optional. It is foundational. When challenges arise, when unexpected invitations surface again, when old influences attempt subtle re-entry, your calm response becomes a stabilizing force. If you react dramatically, you unintentionally signal danger. If you respond steadily, you communicate authority. Authority does not shout. It stands. Your daughter reads your tone more than your words. When she senses confidence in you, she relaxes into discernment within herself. The second layer is conversational precision. Choose language that builds rather than alarms. Avoid framing situations as threats. Frame them as learning opportunities. Instead of saying, "That is dangerous," ask, "What do you notice about how that makes you feel?" This approach strengthens her internal processing rather than replacing it with your opinion. The goal is not to make her dependent on your interpretation. The goal is to help her refine her own. Over time, she will begin articulating alignment without prompting. That is evidence the blueprint is working. Another critical component is rhythm. Structure reduces vulnerability. When daily life carries predictable anchors, external influence has less room to destabilize. Consistent mealtimes, shared routines, moments of connection that repeat weekly create psychological stability. Stability makes manipulation less attractive. Chaos invites distraction. Order nurtures clarity. This does not require rigidity, it requires intentional rhythm. In that rhythm, prayer continues as breath. Speak over her future as if it is already aligned, because it is. Declare that doors meant for her will open without strain, and those not meant for her will close without damage. When you speak with certainty rather than fear, you reinforce heaven's already established design. In addition, cultivate an environment where truth is normalized. When she admits uncertainty or confusion, respond without judgment. Judgment drives secrecy. Safety encourages honesty. Honesty is your greatest protective ally. If she feels safe telling you when something feels off, intervention can happen early rather than late. Your job is not to eliminate her exposure to the world. It is to ensure she never navigates it alone. Teach her to evaluate not only what opportunities offer, but what they require. Every door demands something: time, attention, identity, energy. Help her ask what cost accompanies each offer. This single habit will guard her for decades. Encourage her to value long-term alignment over short-term validation. Affirm her when she chooses depth over applause. That reinforcement strengthens her resistance to counterfeit affirmation. Continue documenting patterns discreetly. You may begin to see how certain influences fade permanently. Do not pursue closure. Absence is closure. When something disappears quietly, let it. The absence itself confirms divine filtration. At the same time, remain open to genuine opportunities that emerge without pressure. True alignment carries peace. It does not demand haste. It does not flatter excessively. It does not isolate her from healthy counsel. When you see these characteristics, support them confidently. Protection is not about blocking everything new. It is about discerning what carries covenant versus what carries control. Finally, understand that your leadership extends beyond her. The atmosphere you cultivate reshapes the entire home. When clarity becomes standard, everyone benefits. When peace is maintained intentionally, tension dissolves more quickly. Your steadiness becomes a template others follow. This is generational stabilization in motion. The reversal that began as intervention now solidifies into structure. The counterfeit path has weakened. Exposure has strengthened discernment. Now daily consistency ensures permanence. What you are building is invisible but powerful. It is the kind of protection that does not need constant crisis to remain relevant. It becomes embedded in culture, and once embedded, it sustains itself. You are no longer in defensive posture. You are in architectural posture. You are constructing an atmosphere where destiny can unfold without distortion. The blueprint has been handed to you. The implementation is quiet but decisive. And as you continue in these steady practices, the protection around her life transitions from reactive shield to permanent covering. The crisis has passed, but this is not the end of the story. What began as warning has become commissioning. What started as exposure has turned into elevation. Your daughter was never meant to simply escape harm. She was meant to rise through it, refined. The schemes that formed in shadow did not just fail. They became the soil from which her strength now grows. What tried to trip her has become the ground she stands on with firmer footing. What aimed to confuse her has sharpened her clarity. What attempted to redirect her has strengthened her alignment. This is the pattern of divine reversal. God does not merely block what was meant for harm. He repurposes it into testimony. You will begin to see new doors open, not rushed, not forced, but steady and unmistakable. Opportunities will come that do not demand compromise. Conversations will happen that feel balanced rather than persuasive. Mentors will appear who honor her boundaries instead of testing them. These are not replacements born of desperation. They are alignments revealed at the right time. Just as Noah stepped out of the ark into a cleansed world, she is stepping into a landscape that feels lighter because the storm never reached her fully. She may not know how close she came to misalignment. She will simply feel clarity where there was once pressure. That is grace. Her voice will grow steadier. You will hear conviction in it, not defiance, not arrogance, but grounded certainty. She will begin articulating dreams that feel anchored rather than impulsive. When she speaks of her future, it will sound less reactive and more intentional. This is not coincidence. It is refinement. Isaiah 43:2 promises that when walking through fire, it will not consume. The fire she encountered did not destroy her. It revealed her. She emerges not naive, but stronger, not untouched by experience, but untangled from deception. That distinction matters. Your role in this legacy cannot be understated. Every whispered prayer, every moment you chose calm over panic, every time you affirmed her identity instead of criticizing her uncertainty, built the bridge she now walks across. You were not a spectator in this story. You were a builder. You stood at the gate when it mattered. And because you stood, the trajectory of her life remained aligned. This is how generational shifts begin. Quiet obedience, steady covering, refusal to ignore discernment. The ripple will extend beyond her. When one life is protected at a critical intersection, entire family patterns begin to shift. Old cycles lose momentum. Conversations within your home soften. Trust deepens. Psalm 103:17 speaks of righteousness extending to children's children. Protection over her today shapes legacy tomorrow. Her clarity becomes foundation for those who follow. Her discernment becomes inherited wisdom. What was intercepted in this season becomes strength, carried forward into the next generation. Now comes the crowning. Not public applause for its own sake, but recognition aligned with purpose. She will step into spaces that once felt intimidating and move with composure. Her name will be spoken with respect. Those who underestimated her will adjust their posture. Not because she demanded validation, but because alignment commands it. Heaven does not only guard, it announces. What was once whispered over her life in prayer is now becoming visible in practice. You must seal this season intentionally. Continue speaking life. Continue blessing her name. Continue leading with steadiness. But release fear fully. The threat has been dismantled. The counterfeit has lost appeal. The circle of light remains. Archangel Michael's representation of protection does not fade when crisis fades. It transitions from defense to escort. She is not only shielded, she is guided. So stand firm in gratitude rather than vigilance. What began as warning ends in confidence. The turning point has passed. The reversal is complete. She will rise, not cautiously, but confidently. And you will stand not anxiously, but assured. This is not survival. It is elevation. This is not narrow escape. It is divine alignment sustained. And from this point forward, her steps carry clarity, her voice carries authority, and her future unfolds under covering that has already proven unbreakable. If this message resonated with something deeper than emotion, if it felt like recognition rather than coincidence, then understand what just happened. You were reminded of who you are in her story. You are not a bystander. You are the gatekeeper, the steady voice, the covering that stood when it mattered most. Her rise is not accidental. It is aligned, and your obedience helped secure it. Stay alert, stay grounded, and stay in agreement with what heaven has already declared. This is only the beginning of what unfolds when clarity meets courage and protection becomes legacy.